All right, I'm just gonna check on some cameras real quick and we'll start streaming soon. Alrighty then. Another stream here. My name is Calvin, and I do streaming of drawings. And we're gonna get started today with an interesting drawing, a 2 point perspective drawing that has a little bit of difficulty, but I know that you can do it if you try. And if you don't worry so much about the outcome, I think that you'll like the results. This is the second time that I'm drawing it too. So if you feel like you messed up in the end, you can come back, try it again. I am going to try it for the second time. I drew it last night and I tried it with some colored pencils, and I wasn't really liking the effect with the colored pencils, but we can try it again. I'm trying it on a different paper this time, something with a little more tooth, or it's a little more rougher on the surface, and hopefully that will give us a better result. So, without further ado, I'm going to show the actual drawing that we're going to be doing today. This is a drawing of, or a photograph, which we will be drawing, of some ruins that have been partially excavated and reconstructed in Crete. Um, the Temple of Knossos. On my last visit to Crete, I visited the palace. It was absolutely ginormous. It was excavated around 100 years ago, believe it or not. People didn't believe that it existed. They thought it only existed in myth, but it actually does exist. and it's quite a large complex with many, many buildings that all kind of connect into one big complex. And there, at the time, archaeology was still kind of in its infancy, and so there was all these interventions that they made. They realized when they were excavating it that parts of it would not be stable if they continued to excavate it without an intervention. So this photograph shows some columns that are modern that they built to hold up that top part. But then also too, there was kind of some debate in the archaeology community about making things look like what they actually look like so that tourists could come and see it and pay money and so on and so forth. Um, Fortunately, there isn't tons of intervention at this place. A lot of it was kept as it was so that you can see it. The other thing, too, that kind of is a shame is some of the stones that were used to make this that got exposed are eroding away because of the exposure. So it's kind of a hard debate about whether this should have been excavated at all, but things were like that back then, weren't they? Anyway, so an interesting thing about this photograph is that it actually is a great example of 2-point perspective. And I'll show you the last live stream that I did. I talked an awful lot about lines leading to a horizon line. And so I decided to put the photo into Photoshop and show you exactly what I mean by that. There's a lot of information about this on the internet as well. It is a very rudimentary drawing exercise and concept in most art classes. And we're going to talk about it a little bit here. If you know about it already, you can refresh yourself and learn about something kind of funny, though, too, about this photograph in a minute. But first, I'm going to just lay out what we're talking about. So the red line is what's known as the horizon line. So if you look off in the distance, there is a point where you can no longer see anymore, and that is the horizon line. It's also the line where the sun sets or the sun rises. And thus, things that are farther away look smaller. Things that are closer up appear bigger than the things farther away. And if you take an object like a cube, or in this case, a colon colonnade of columns, they appear to get smaller. If you were to go right up to them, they are actually the same size columns, but they're going in the direction of a horizon line and a vanishing point. Now, the vanishing points, there's two of them in this photograph. One is to the left and one is to the right. That's where all those black lines, the lines of the architecture that we're about to draw, vanish. Now, you can say when you're drawing that you could take a straight edge and make all of those angles or those lines or those rays, as you would call them in mathematics, geometry, all should go to the same point, right? And it sort of looks like some of the things don't, even though they are parallel. I was there, I can confirm. Those walls on the left and the right that are closest to the viewer, those actually are parallel to those walls that you see in the midground, but they do not go to the same vanishing point. And to further illustrate that, I will bring up some further drawing that I did on this photograph. The blue lines actually represent quite a few different lines that do not go to that same vanishing point, and even some of them are located where I drew some of those black lines. Now, you might be wondering, how is this possible? Well, first of all, some things just aren't going to go to the same vanishing point because they're not parallel. But you may be asking yourself, but you just said those two walls in the foreground are parallel. So, and you may have noticed this in other photography, particularly real estate listings, the camera person creates a lot more space by using what's called a wide angle lens. And this makes an interior space, and in this case, an exterior space, look much larger than it actually is. And thus it creates distortion. So that may also be partially why some of this drawing or this photograph, I'm going to keep mixing it up, it's fine, looks a little off. And believe it or not, there's actually some curvature going on that may be a little bit hard to discern with just the naked eye. And I'm going to go back to the original drawing here, and you'll see what I'm talking about now. So look at the top of the building. There's the column in the very middle, which will probably be our dead center focal point. If you look at those lines that come off of it, off of the very top, and go away into the horizon line, you'll actually notice they're not very straight. They kind of have a curve to them. And that is probably due not to lazy builders, because trust me, I was there. It was very well constructed, very straight. They are not curved. That's distortion from this wide angle lens. Unfortunately, I don't have a picture without a wide angle lens, but that is what is going on. So it's going to be a little bit difficult to draw, but we can fudge some things here. Nothing is hard and fast in drawing, but let's get into it. Now, I'm going to use this picture as the guide, but I'm going to draw out a horizon line and some points and draw lines across to meet those vanishing points. So let's just get right into it. Okay. So, as always, so far anyways, we've been using these Faber-Castell pencils. You may see that it's a little dark here. I'm working on that with some light. Eventually, we'll have some lights here in the studio. These are just very, very basic pencils that I got in England. There is 6 different hardnesses of them. If you do not have these, that's okay. Just use a regular number 2 pencil. But that number 2 actually refers to hardness of the pencil. So the harder the graphite, the lighter lines you will make, and the harder you have to press to get darker lines. The softer the graphite, the less hard, the less pressure you have to apply to get dark lines. So, really, what you want to start with is something like a number 2 pencil to lightly fill it in. I'm going to use a 2B pencil. I don't have a number 2 pencil, but it's very close. And this is very hard graphite. Oh, not a 2B. Let's do a 2H. The H probably stands for hard. But that one, I think, will give us these light lines where we just want to very barely, you probably can't even see it, lines that we're looking for. All right. So when I'm looking at the drawing here, I do kind of notice that this column is pretty much dead center. So we can demarcate that really quick. And I'm just going to use a piece of paper as a straight edge. You can use a ruler. I don't have one. It's fine. We're drawing. No big deal. So I'm going to look at my paper and I'm going to see there is some kind of cutoff here. But basically, I'm going to measure with my eyes what the halfway point is approximately of my paper. And drawing is all about, at least in my opinion, these like halfway points. You're always trying to find halfway points to measure with your eye roughly where things go. And then I'm going to take my piece of paper and just very lightly, don't do it hard because if you think you need to change it, it'll be way easier to erase. Which, by the way, I use one of these Mars plastic erasers. They're really good for erasing things. Another thing I have too that I haven't introduced to the show yet is a kneaded eraser. And these are kind of cool because you can squish this into a really pointy shape if you have to erase something very detailed. You can use that. And then the best part is it kind of cleans itself as you need it. These are really cheap too. If you don't have that, you could just use a regular pencil eraser. Those are great. Let's continue the drawing. So, the next thing I'm going to do is fill in that horizon line. So let's look at our drawing, or our, not our drawing, but our annotated, let's call it, photograph from before. So when you look at this, it really looks like the horizon line, and I'm going to look at it bigger. We need to figure out exactly where the horizon line is. And it looks like it's not quite half, but a little less than half of the page. So, and just switch back to where we were. I kind of just roughly estimated the size of the column in the middle. And then we're going to kind of just roughly estimate the halfway point. That looks about right to me. And then the horizon line is a little less than that. Now, you don't need to do this for every drawing. I typically don't, but I just really want to hit home what's going on with 2 point perspective and a horizon line and vanishing points. I just think that's really important. If you want to draw in 3D, you need to know the basic concepts behind it and see how it works in practice. Okay. Where should we start? So the other thing that we can do is approximate where those vanishing points are. Now these are going to be pretty close to the edge of the page. It's almost like we could say that it's about maybe a fifth of a page. I'm measuring with my eyes again. So what's half of this? It's right there, right? What's half of this length? It's like that, right? Okay. And if we look at our drawing, sorry, so half of this is this, and half of this length is about this. And if we look at our source material once more, if this is like half, maybe that's like half of that. Oh, bear with me here. I'm a little new to putting all that on the screen for y'all, but we can figure this out. So I think that the vanishing points basically aren't exactly half of this. It's more like that. And we'll do that on the other side. So half of this and a little extra. These are going to be our vanishing points, I think. I think that will work pretty well. And you know what? We're working with this really light pencil. It'll be no big deal if we need to erase it again. If you think it's beyond repair, take a new piece of paper out and start the video over. It's okay. You're going to make a lot of drawings and you shouldn't give up. I know that you can do it and make something that you're proud of. Like I absolutely think that. I believe in you. Okay. So our next step could be let's go ahead and do the bottom of that pillar. And I'm taking this piece of paper as a straight edge again. There's no point in it being grid paper, it's just all that I had. You could use an envelope from some junk mail. You could use a ruler. It doesn't matter. We're not actually measuring anything. And I'm just going to lightly fill in that line. So I connected to the vanishing point to what I think is a good spot for the bottom of that column in the center. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for the other side. Now, even this isn't going to be as accurate as the photograph, but that doesn't matter. The context that this will be viewed in probably won't be like, look at this photograph, look at this drawing. People are going to look at the drawing by itself. Okay, and then let's just do the top. Let's just go ahead and do the top and we'll slowly build it out from there. This is going to be a two-part drawing. I don't have tons of time today, but I will do two parts to this or three if we have to. I really want to color this in with some colored pencils, um, but I realize that this will be a long time. Lightly drawing in the top parts now. And now you can see we have this diamond. In essence, you have in the middle here the shape of this column. Now, there is some tricky things going on with that different tiers of the columns. There's different widths, different thicknesses, and I struggled with this as well, but there are some things that can be figured out from the the overall structure of it and how it's measured out. So one thing that I can do is just start with the width of the bottom, the width and the length of the bottom. I'm trying to decide, looking at the drawing or the photograph, where the right position is for the base. There's like a base. And that looks right to me. Not too thick. I'm just guesstimating here, folks. You have to use your eye, and that comes with a lot of practice. So I've now lined up that point with that vanishing point with my straight edge, but then I lined it up with the little leg that I put there, and then what I'm guessing is the height of that bottom stone. And I'm just going to draw across to here like that. There's no need to do all of these. You can if you want to be like, wow, look at how much dimensionality this has, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Those are just kind of guides to help you. You don't need to do that every time you draw something like this. Honestly, I feel like a lot of times I just sort of rough estimate things. If I'm going to do something on like an expensive canvas or an expensive piece of paper, I will do more planning like this to make sure that I get the best out of it, that I know this is going to be more of a finished piece. And this might be more of a finished piece for you. I don't know. It's however you want it to be. Okay. So, moving on, kind of an interesting thing is there's two stones on the very top. And let's say this is the top of the first of the two stones. And one thing that's kind of interesting too is that top stone has less. It has less. So I'm going to take maybe like a quarter of an inch there, and I'm going to give it, let's say that much smaller. You see that? I'll put the straight edge here. So this is longer than that top one by kind of a lot. So I've gone ahead and done that in. Yeah, I think that looks about right. You have to think about scale when you do a drawing like this. And what I mean by scale is, the picture that I'm looking at may be a lot bigger than the piece of paper I'm drawing on, so I need to make it a lot smaller. It also might be a lot bigger, so I might need to, well, vice versa, you get what I mean. Um, it's all part of the process. So there is like a border that is almost as big as the bottom one. And again, I'm just sort of eyeing it up here, making it a little bit wider there. And again, when I did this, I lined it up to the vanishing point. So everything gets smaller as it goes farther away. Remember when I said that in the beginning? I'm going to use that point right there again. I'm going to leave a little bit of edge on there. That's for that bottom part. And then this, I'm going to raise this up a little bit more. This kind of has like a rocky edge to it, a rough edge. This is probably excavated by the archaeologists that found that. It's just a lot rougher stone. It's not clean like some of the other stone that seems like a modern intervention. All right. Looking pretty good so far. One thing I did notice though is the video of what I'm drawing is upside down. Oh no. I can fix that right now. I hope that you're not too confused about what I was doing there. I don't know why it's not flipping over. All right, let's take a break. Let's take a break. That's embarrassing, but I'm not going to take myself too seriously. We'll be right back. Okay, so that was kind of a goofy mistake, but we will prevail. I didn't draw a ton, so hopefully you were able to follow along. If you did exactly what I did, maybe flip your paper over because now it's supposed to be like this. Yay. It's okay. We should be good. Do not worry. If you feel like you need to start over because of that, whatever, go ahead and do so. But now this makes sense, I hope. All right. Okay. So I'm liking the way that this is looking so far. I don't think I need to correct anything, but you never know. Okay. The next thing that I think we should do is just keep working on this column, and that'll help you understand some of what's going on. And one thing that I like to do too, instead of using that big piece of paper for everything, doing a straight edge, I like to use like a business card. A little piece of cardstock will work pretty well too. But I'm just going to roughly, very lightly, it's easy to do a hard line when you're using straight edge. Just remember, nice light touch. Okay. I think the other thing I'll do too, to avoid any confusion, is that. That doesn't need to be there. Okay. Then the next thing I'm gonna do, this is kind of that top little border, is I'm going to take the big piece of paper and I'm gonna kind of guesstimate, but lining up to my vanishing point, lining up to that line right there, is draw the other part, the bottom of that layer. Okay, there you go. There you go. That's what that part looks like. Okay, moving on. Before I get too far, let's kind of deal with the bottom part. So if you look at the that bottom layer that I drew here, there's actually four blocks that go up to about here. Um, and that horizon line is kind of smack dab in the middle of, is it? Yes. So that middle block is sort of smack dab in the middle of that block. I don't know if I'm going to use that or not. You could. So you could split like that. Let's just say that's the middle block. And then you could split the difference on that one. Let's just say that's like the top. There's like a wooden frame around here that's protecting an older block, and then there's new blocks on top of it. Yeah. And then maybe this is a bit too high. Sorry if this is a little bit not planned, but that's kind of how drawing goes sometimes. You have to kind of keep making little adjustments till you get it right. It's sort of an excavation as well. Um, okay, so I'm gonna take my straight edge now, and you can see where that ends. And this one, if you look at the picture, actually ends a little bit before that one. So I'm going to draw that. And the same kind of goes for that side. I'm going to line up with my vanishing point once more. And it sort of ends right there, right? I'm going to draw that line. Okay, so that's like the wooden frame that goes around that bottom stone. So I'm just going to quickly fill in all of that right there. These lines should be straight up and down, okay? Any straight up and down lines, they really are going to be straight up and down unless it's outside of this perfect geometry that they've created. Even their geometry is going to be a little bit off, though. Nothing's exactly perfectly square. Try as we might make that happen. So just remember that's the outer outlines of the Hi Amanda, how are you doing? Everything's going good here. Just doing another live stream. We're drawing some ruins on the island of Crete, the Palace of Knossos. If you haven't subscribed already, give me a subscribe and you'll be notified every time that I do a live stream. So, continuing on, I think what I'll do is I'll actually make the straight lines for this middle section of the column. Now, remember, it's not going to go all the way up, but I also don't know exactly how tall it should be yet. Okay, so that's interesting. So I think I was pretty much right on here. There's one, two, three bricks, and then there's space in between these two parts. Um, so maybe I'll make this line a little bit lower. Make each one of these lines a little bit lower. Not to confuse you, but these are the little adjustments that have to be made. And then I'm going to take that point, line it up with the vanishing point, go like that. Do the same thing for this side. Now, what I keep doing here, though, is I keep looking at my drawing and then looking at the source material and making little measurements. I'm looking at things in relation to other parts of it, just making sure everything's looking pleasing to me. That's really what I'm measuring it against. Does this look good to me? Is this what I want to do? Do I need to make any sort of adjustments? One thing that's kind of interesting that I noticed yesterday is this line is almost straight. And for a minute, I was kind of thinking, because I didn't even bother drawing like the horizon line or anything, that it was actually exactly where the horizon line is. And it's really not. It's actually a little bit below. But if it was exactly at that horizon line, that each side's line would actually appear straight, but it's not. Okay. I'm going to continue with this one right here. And this one will look a little straight too, because the closer you get to the horizon line, the straighter it will look. It's not a hard and fast rule. It really only works for 2 point perspective. Depends on the elements that you're using, and so on. There you go. There's your three layers of that brick. And then down below is that other part. Just to finish this off too, I'm just going to draw the little parts for these planks of wood that make this frame that hold it together. That is there, and it's just going to make me want to do it the whole time. And see if you can draw what this frame looks like. It's kind of a weird little cube that they made out of rectangular pieces of wood. Tried to make a cube like this when I was in college. It was like, oh wow, it's not just like you have to be aware of like the inside parts as well. And you could miter all these pieces, which is an angled cut. Quite a complex process on cutting things with like a chop saw or a bandsaw or a circular saw. But I digress. This is not a carpentry channel, thankfully. I do miss doing carpentry. I don't have the tools nor the space, but I always have that in the back of my head that one day I will return to doing some woodshop stuff. I really do enjoy doing it. Okay, so I've kind of made that loose wooden frame that goes around it. I'll let you guys catch up here if you need to catch up. I need to catch up at looking at my source material and then looking at what I got on my page. And there is something that I noticed here, actually. So you'll notice on this side, I drew the lines longer than I had to for this part. But this part seems to overhang the right amount. This part actually almost meets up. So you don't have to do this if you didn't, mm, you know, make that same kind of miscalculation. But I did. So I'm going to make this a little bit longer. And I'm just going to put in that straight line. So now it hangs off that much more. And that actually looks more accurate to the photograph, the source material. Okay, moving on. So now we have like all these other layers that we need to put underneath. And just for clarity's sake, so you know what I'm talking about. I'm going to erase these two lines. Man, this kneaded eraser really works well. I was hardly applying any pressure and it just melts it off. It's really great. Okay, so I'm just going to add a little edge here. And that's going to represent the next layer. And lined up that and that edge there. So that gave me exactly where I needed to go with there. I'm going to do the same thing on that side as well. Okay, now I'm going to do it again. I'm going to add a little bit more. They're kind of the same width. So I'm just sort of guesstimating how tall this layer should be and how far out it should go. But now I'm going to hit it again, line that up with that, and then zoom it all the way to the middle. Do the same for this side. That was a little off. I'm going to fix that just so they meet the right spot. There we go. Kind of an interesting thing with these is they go across, but then they sink on the inside of that. And I'll zoom in so you can really see that. You see that? So I want like this. That meets that, right? Just like this one too. But then that gets cut off. And that goes the same for this too. It just gets cut off. So you can't see it. That's how you draw that. I'm gonna clean that up. So now the next part is not as wide as that. So it looks a little nicer. Actually is the same width as that middle column. I'm going to use that guide, the middle column. Okay. Now it gets a little bit tricky as to what way we can go with this. So I think what I'll do is make a line right here because this is sort of the same width as that one. And I'll do the same thing right here. This is where it gets intense, guys. Not gonna lie to you. But if you keep looking at your source material, you should be able to make this happen. Keep your wits about you. Demarcate in your head which lines are which. The interesting thing too is if you want to make these like undercut lines, you line that up with that. Go like that. Same thing with this side. Line that up. See what I mean? Okay. Now we'll do this. It's looking like this is enough space. Okay. Now, very easy to round things out. I'm going to grab my business card. Almost there. Okay. There you go. There's the column, guys. So Hopefully you are at that point. I guess the last thing that I need to add that I'm sort of missing is like this outer side. Just line it up with my vanishing point. Line that one up with that vanishing point. Those little touches really go a long way to show realism and dimensionality. All right, so that's about all that I can do for today. Apologies for it being upside down earlier, but that's just what happens. It's I'm new to this. I'm still trying to make this work. But yeah, we will come back tomorrow with another live stream and we'll keep working on this. We'll add in all of the little parts that go along the side and hopefully we'll have it all blocked in. So, all right, I'll see you next time.